Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, September 26, 2023. President Joe Biden makes history as the first sitting president to join a picket line, traveling to Michigan to be with striking UAW members in front of a General Motors facility, telling the auto workers, "Let's keep going, you deserve what you've earned, and you deserve a hell of a lot more than you've been getting paid now." 4 days until the current federal government spending authorization expires, and if something does not take its place, the government will shut down. We'll have the latest on what's happening in the House, where a few conservative Republicans are forcing debate on individual full fiscal year spending bills and resisting a short-term stopgap, and the Senate, where an emergency month-and-a-half government spending bill is advancing. Federal Communications Commission Chair Jessica Rosenworcel announces that the new Democratic majority on the FCC will move to restore the open internet net neutrality rules that were repealed under former President Trump. These rules require internet service providers to treat all content the same, without blocking or giving preference to some. A barrage of Democratic senators are calling on Senator Robert Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey, to resign a day after Senator Menendez said he was totally innocent of the federal corruption and bribery charges against him, and plans to vigorously fight them and remain a U.S. Senator. And former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has her official portrait unveiled at the State Department. This from Associated Press. In Michigan, President Joe Biden joined United Auto Workers strikers on their picket line Tuesday as their work stoppage against major car makers hit day 12. A demonstration of support for organized labor apparently unparalleled in presidential history. He walked along the picket line, exchanging fist bumps with grinning workers. He encouraged them to continue fighting for better wages despite concerns that a prolonged strike could damage the economy, saying, "Stick with it." They chanted "No deal, no wheels," and "No pay, no parts." He was joined by UAW President Shawn Fain. President Biden spoke through a bullhorn before passing it off to Shawn Fain. They were at a GM parts distribution warehouse in a suburb of Detroit.
I marched a lot of UAW picket lines when I was a senator since 1973, but I tell you what, first time I've ever done it as a president. Folks, look, one thing is real simple, and to be very brief. The fact of the matter is that you guys, the UAW, you saved the automobile industry back in 2008 and before. Made a lot of sacrifices, gave up a lot, and the companies were in trouble. But now they're doing incredibly well. And guess what? You should be doing incredibly well too. It's a simple proposition. Stick with it, because you deserve the significant raise you need and other benefits.
Let's get it!
Let's get back what we lost, okay? Yeah. We say them, it's about time them to step up for us. Thank you. Now, there's a guy I know you don't know here, but I brought him along anyway. Shawn Fain, your president. All right, good afternoon, UAW family. I want to thank Local 174, home of Walter Reuther. Thank this local leadership and Director Laura Dickerson. Members, because you're all the reason we're here. This is all about the membership. You know, this site, Willow Run, it holds a historic place in the history of our union and our country. You know, this was part of the arsenal of democracy during World War II. It's where they built the B-24 Liberator bomber. You know, that bomber, they built one of those per hour when they were at their peak. It's what helped us win the war. So today, 80 years later, we find ourselves here again with the arsenal of democracy. It's a different kind of arsenal of democracy, and it's a different kind of war we're fighting. Today, the enemy isn't some foreign country miles away. It's right here in our own area. It's corporate greed. And the weapon we produce to fight that enemy, it's the liberators, the true liberators. It's the working class people All of you working your butts off on those lines to deliver great product for our companies.
That's right.
That's how we're going to defeat these people. That's how we're going to defeat corporate greed, is by standing together. You know, this is a historic moment. The first time in our country's history that a sitting USA president has came out and stood on the picket line.
Shawn Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers, along with President Joe Biden, picketing a GM plant in Wayne County, Michigan today. A story from CNN, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis can't be pleased that President Joe Biden is joining the auto workers picket line Tuesday, but in statements Tuesday, none criticized the president's support for the union. Instead, they focused on defending their latest offers at the bargaining table. A GM statement reads, "Our focus is not on politics, but continues to be on bargaining in good faith with the UAW leadership to reach an agreement as quickly as possible that rewards our workforce and allows GM to succeed and thrive into the future." This is Washington Today, and now to federal government spending. The current authorization expires at the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. So if new authorization is not signed into law by October 1st, the start of the new fiscal year, there would be a government shutdown. The U.S. House and Senate are pursuing different paths. The House starting to work on 4 full fiscal year spending bills demanded by a handful of Republican members who will not support a short-term spending bill. Well, over in the Senate, they're beginning to consider a short-term bill. We spoke about this with Julie Grace Brufke, congressional reporter for Axios.
So the House is supposed to take up a procedural vote so they can vote on 4 appropriation bills later this week, and there's hopes of passing a stopgap spending bill, although right now it seems like Kevin McCarthy is short on the votes still to pass that stopgap. So I've spoken to sources over the weekend. They had a conference call over the weekend, and it seems like the 4 bills that they are brought to that they plan to bring to the floor, the individual bills, might also have some issues over Ukraine funding and a couple other issues there. So every lawmaker I've talked to said to brace for some long nights and chaotic days. So it's going to be an interesting week.
When it comes to those 4 bills, can you spell out how Ukraine funding can complicate that? And can you also spell out how issues concerning border security could complicate that?
Well, right now, you've got a sizable number of Republicans that don't want to vote for any appropriations bill that provides more funding to Ukraine right now. So right now in the DOD expense bill, or the DOD funding bill, that they, during the call over the weekend, I talked to sources, Kevin McCarthy kind of laid out that due to procedural issues, taking the Ukraine funding out of the bill that they plan to bring to the floor was difficult. So they're planning to go through, I think, 80 or more amendments on that bill alone. So we'll see where things go with that and whether it gets to the floor. But with border funding, they're hoping to attach to a continuing resolution border funding, but whether a CR can pass, it still kind of looks grim. So the Senate's kind of trying to press them. They're going to be taking up their own stopgap measure, kind of trying strong arm the House into bringing a short-term measure to the floor. So that's kind of where things stand there.
Thank you for the segue. On the Senate side, then, what can we expect specifically on that CR? What is? Give us the details of that.
So it's a cleaner CR. The one over on the House side, conservatives were pushing for spending cuts, border. They kind of took a more bipartisan approach over on the Senate side. So also over on the House side, there's talk of moderates kind of teaming up with Democrats to force a vote on a more bipartisan bill that would include border and Ukraine funding. So they could use some procedural tactics later in the week to potentially try and force a vote on that, which would kind of sidestep around Speaker McCarthy. So there's a lot of options on the table and a lot of different ways this could play out. But a government shutdown is definitely something that's a strong possibility by the end of the week, with just days to go now.
To what degree is Speaker McCarthy open to working with Democrats on any front in order to keep the government funded?
Now, right now, he's kind of encouraged Republicans to work together to kind of try and strong arm the Senate into taking up some of this border stuff. He feels that it's they're in a stronger negotiating position if they pass these individual bills and a CR over along party lines. So I think it gets to a point where he's probably going to have to work with Democrats, given there's a group that's got a group of more than 7 that are planning to kind of block any stopgap measure. So he's in a tough position right now.
Julie Grace Brufke is a congressional reporter for Axios, joining C-SPAN on our morning show, Washington Journal. The 4 fiscal year 2024 spending bills that the House plans to try to advance this week are for defense, State Department and Foreign Operations, Homeland Security, and agriculture. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy held a news conference in the Capitol building today and emphasized that he would only support a short-term government spending bill to avoid a shutdown if it has those border security protections.
Can you guarantee that there will not be a shutdown at the end of this week?
Look, I have worked all my time to make sure that there would not be a shutdown. You've watched me put item after item on the floor. I even went all the way back when we did the debt ceiling to put a provision in there that if the work's not done, you get 1% cut across the board. It's made the Senate act in committee, but they haven't been able to act on the floor yet. With the weird thing here, the president is the highest elected person in the nation. The president is the one person that is determining the current policy that we have on the border. The House has passed a bill to deal with it. The Senate has done nothing with it. The president can really come down to this and make sure government stays open. All he has to do takes some action on the border to secure it, so those border agents don't come back bloody, so there's not trains of people just running in, so the fentanyl doesn't keep filling our schools and killing our children. And you know what? We're going to pass the CR that deals with it. He can say he wants to do something with it. I'll join with him, and we'll keep government open, and we'll finish out the rest of that. I don't think that's too much for America or what anybody else has.
Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, meeting with reporters today in the U.S. Capitol building. This story from The Hill. Speaker McCarthy on Tuesday said it would be very important to meet with President Biden amid discussions over averting a government shutdown, addressing the situation at the southern border. The comment came after a reporter asked the speaker why he would not consider cutting a deal with Democrats to keep the government open past the end of the month. He responded, "Why don't we just cut a deal with the president?" Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina, member of the Freedom Caucus, also a member of the Rules Committee, was interviewed Monday night on CNN about why he and the few other House Republicans held out to not pass a short-term government funding bill and avoid the shutdown, instead begin the long debate on the full fiscal year spending bills for each department. He, too, mentioned the importance of border security.
Do you think we're heading toward a shutdown? What's your sense of it right now?
Yes, we are. We will be, next week, we met Saturday in Rules Committee, passed out 4 bills that we'll send to the floor in the rule: Department of Defense, Agriculture, Homeland Security, and State and Foreign Ops. We will put them on the floor. We'll probably debate it the next 2 days and vote on it by Friday and hopefully send that over. But Jim, the real issue is not the shutdown. The real issue is the 2 crises we have in this country: economic security crisis and economic crisis. We've got a problem in this country, and what we've done in rules is attached to the Homeland bill. We've got the language that unless they enforce H.R. 2, that is the security border, strict enforcement of that, we're not going to fund Mayorkas because he hadn't done the job and he hadn't put the money to it. This administration is put this country in a tough shape economically and with national security. So,
well, won't a government shutdown exacerbate the economic situation in this country? And it's certainly not going to help down at the border if Border Patrol agents aren't getting paid because there's a government shutdown.
Well, we can't expect a different result. Again, we've done this, I don't know how many years. That's why we've got the $32 trillion in debt. We're going to have a permanent shutdown if we don't get this economic crisis handled in this country. And so we're going to try to, one thing that we did in January in the election of McCarthy is ask for the spending bills, 12 appropriation bills, to go line item by line item in June and July and not wait till the last minute. So September 30th has never been a figment of our imagination. October 1 has always been the new budget year.
And is there a part of you that wants to shut the government down to send a message? Is that part of this? There are just some members in the Freedom Caucus who want to shut it down to see if the message can get across that you're trying to send.
No, the message we're getting across is it's not business as usual. We're not going to bankrupt this country. We're just not going to do it. And to keep doing the same thing. And we've always, both Democrat and Republican, Jim, have run it down to the wire. And then it'll go on these continuing resolutions. It'll go till, if we approve it, a spending gap, spending amount, either 30 days or we get it through Christmas, and then say, oh, we're going to have to go to the same spending levels, but much higher as we've always done. And we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So you've got a government that sure shut the businesses down. They sure shut the school children out of schools. And it's time that we get a handle on it, and we're going to do it.
Congressman Ralph Norman, Republican from South Carolina, member of the Freedom Caucus, on CNN Monday night. Story from NBC News. Kevin McCarthy faces an unenviable choice this week: keep his job as Speaker or team up with Democrats to keep the government from shutting down. Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida, and other conservative hardliners are threatening to overthrow Speaker McCarthy if he works with Democrats to pass a short-term stopgap measure to keep the government open. That's how NBC News put it. Congressman John Larson, Democrat from Connecticut, joined C-SPAN this morning to discuss the Democrats' position.
We see the Senate side working on a possible clean CR to hand to the House to see if they'll vote on it. What are House Democrats prepared to do to keep a shutdown from happening?
Vote for a clean CR. I think that's, when you listen to Mitch McConnell speak, and even when you listen to Speaker McCarthy, they get it and understand that government needs to function. And we've got to take this stress off of the backs of the American people and do the job that we're elected to do and govern and take up the appropriations bills and pass them and move on. But as you point out, the Senate will deliver a clean CR. And by that, for the viewers, mean that one that's not filled with all what we would say poison pills that would prevent people from voting on it. And so I think that that's the right approach. It's the one that should be followed. Let's hope that Speaker McCarthy can corral his members into doing so. And if not, please come across the aisle. Give us a clean CR, and I think you'll find that it's widely received by Democrats as well.
There's a bipartisan bill from the Problem Solvers Caucus that they want to use to put a discharge position on the floor for a vote. Could Democrats rally behind that?
It's possible. I think the easiest way is to take the clean CR that the Senate finds over. But again, I commend the fact that people are working together, whether they're problem solvers, whether they're Republicans, whether they're Democrats, to make sure that the government stays open and functions. That's what the American people want. And there's a lot at stake here. It may not seem immediately evident, and for many it seems like similar political talk in Washington, but that kitchen table discussion between federal employees and police officers and firefighters and teachers, et cetera, is real, and it's not a stress that they should be going through. We're elected to do a job and have a responsibility to run and operate government during our time in office.
Congressman John Larson is a Democrat from Connecticut on C-SPAN's Washington Journal morning program this morning. Roll Call reports that even as Speaker McCarthy preps a last-ditch attempt to get his unruly conference in line behind a spending strategy, there were quiet staff-level talks happening among the four corners of the congressional leadership in both chambers to somehow avert a shutdown. Senate Democratic and Republican leaders have been negotiating the content of a stopgap spending measure while keeping House Republican leaders in the loop, sources familiar with the talks said. They are cognizant of the pressure Speaker McCarthy is facing and are trying to give him something his conference can feasibly swallow, these people said. Accordingly, Senate leaders are said to be considering leaving out Ukraine aid and possibly additional supplemental disaster relief appropriations. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke today on the Senate floor.
We now have 4 days to go until funding expires on Saturday at midnight. We are now right at the precipice. Yet all last week, Speaker McCarthy, instead of focusing on bipartisanship, catered to the hard right and has nothing to show for it. And now the Speaker will put on the floor hard right appropriation bills that have nothing to do with avoiding a shutdown. So this week, the Senate will move forward first. Over the weekend, Senate Democrats and Republicans together worked in good faith to reach an agreement on a continuing resolution that will keep the government open beyond September 30th. We are very close to finishing our work and hope to release text very soon. This bipartisan CR is a temporary solution, a bridge towards cooperation and away from extremism. And it will allow us to keep working to fully fund the federal government and spare American families the pain of a shutdown. While for sure this bill does not have everything either side wants, it will continue to fund the government at present levels, while maintaining our commitment to Ukraine's security and humanitarian needs, while also ensuring those impacted by natural disasters across the country begin to get the resources they need. In a few hours, we'll hold the first procedural vote to move forward on the vehicle for this CR. And I thank my colleagues and staff from both sides of the aisle who spent all weekend negotiating in good faith to get us to this point. The Senate CR is a good, sensible, and bipartisan, let me emphasize, bipartisan bill. It will achieve the most important immediate goal, avoiding a shutdown. Will protect American families from needless pain, pay our troops, and make good on our promise to American seniors. It will promote access to affordable health care, sustain investment in life-saving research, and avoid costly disruptions to our supply chains. Now, of course, today's agreement won't have everything that both sides want. But let me repeat, this CR is a bridge, not a final destination. It will help us achieve our immediate and necessary goal of avoiding a government shutdown and move us away from the senseless and aimless extremism that has dominated the House, so we can get to work on appropriations.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. After he spoke a short time later, the senator who chairs the Appropriations Committee, Democrat Patty Murray of Washington State, released what she called a bipartisan continuing resolution that, according to her words, extends government funding through November 17th, extends funding to help communities struck by disaster, and continues support for Ukraine at a pivotal moment, prevents critical health statutes from lapsing to ensure funding for community health centers and teaching health centers does not expire, extends the Federal Aviation Administration's authorities through the end of the calendar year, ensures federal wildland firefighters will not see a pay cut, and ensures the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, WIC, will continue to be able to serve the nearly 7 million women and children who rely on it. That language from the Senate Appropriations Committee chair on the government funding measure called a continuing resolution that the Senate is considering. The Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, also spoke today on the floor about funding.
At midnight on Sunday, current appropriations will run out and the federal government will shut down. Over the years, I've been pretty clear in my view that government shutdowns are bad news, whichever way you look at them. They don't work as political bargaining chips. They create unnecessary hardships for millions of Americans. For example, the nearly 46,000 service members and 22,000 civilian workers in my home state of Kentucky who earn federal government paychecks. And they hardly ever produce meaningful policy outcomes at the end of the day. A government shutdown would be an unnecessary disruption of the important work of the Senate's agenda. So I would urge each of my colleagues to work this week to avoid one. For the past several months, Senator Collins, Senator Murray, and our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee have worked diligently to help the Senate fulfill our commitment to funding the government through regular order. As that important work continues, colleagues in both chambers are rightly concerned about a number of distinct priorities. They're focused on taking further action to rein in reckless spending as we continue to rebuild our national defense. They're concerned about addressing the consequences of the Biden administration's failure to secure our southern border. They're eager to provide relief to communities recovering from natural disasters, from Hawaii to Florida, and bipartisan majorities recognize the ongoing need to counter Russia and China and continue to provide lethal aid to Ukraine. In the coming weeks, I hope the administration will work with Congress to address these pressing needs. But in order to work on appropriations to continue uninterrupted, Congress needs to extend government funding by the end of this week. The sooner Congress keeps the light on, the sooner these important conversations can resume. The clearest path forward is a standard, short-term, continuing resolution. Our work this week needs to produce the resources and flexibility to maintain essential government functions at their current rates of operation while progress on full-year appropriations continues.
The Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor. You can always follow the Senate live gavel to gavel on C-SPAN 2. The House is on C-SPAN and both streamed at cspan.org and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. Wall Street today, the Dow down 388, NASDAQ down 207, S&P down 63. This from Bloomberg News. The Federal Communications Commission chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel, said she plans to reinstate net neutrality oversight of broadband providers that was rescinded under former President Donald Trump. She announced the effort at the National Press Club, confirming an earlier Bloomberg report and kicking off a renewed fight over regulation. She is proposing the FCC take the first steps to commit to rules that would treat broadband internet as an essential service, putting it on par with water, power, and phone service. That was from Bloomberg News. Here is Jessica Rosenworcel at the National Press Club.
This afternoon, I'm sharing with my colleagues a rulemaking that proposes to reinstate net neutrality. This is a first step. When we vote on this rulemaking, we will invite public comment about how restoring net neutrality rules can help ensure internet access is fast, open, and fair. We will need to develop an updated record to identify the best way to restore these policies and have a uniform national open internet standard. Now, I recognize that we're kicking off this rulemaking, and that will be the headline today. But while I have your attention, there's something else I want to share to you about this process and this policy today. The repeal of net neutrality rules was problematic not only because it wiped away enforceable bright line policies to prevent blocking, throttling, and paid prioritization. It was problematic because what the agency did reversed the decision to oversee broadband as an internet access telecommunications service under Title II of the Communications Act. Well, it had a lot of downstream consequences, and I think we should talk about them. Now, that last sentence is complicated, and I realize if you are not from Washington, it's a little hard to unpack, so let me do it for you. Title II is the part of the law that gives the FCC clear authority to serve as a watchdog over the communications marketplace and look out for the public interest. Title II took on special importance in the net neutrality debate because the courts have ruled that the FCC has clear authority to enforce open internet policies if broadband internet is classified as a Title II service. And providing a strong foundation for net neutrality rules is a good reason to support classifying broadband internet as a Title II service. But again, there are downstream consequences that flow from the agency retreating from Title II, and they need attention. So let me explain. Back to the pandemic. It made clear that broadband is essential infrastructure for modern life. Access to the internet is now access to everything. And common sense tells us that the nation's leading communications watchdog should have the muscle it needs to protect consumers and make sure their internet access is fast, open, and fair.
FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel today at the National Press Club. Net neutrality rules were first adopted under President Obama, then repealed under President Trump. This week, Democrats took a 3-2 majority control of the FCC for the first time in the Biden presidency. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. A few more headlines from Associated Press. The Supreme Court on Tuesday allowed the drawing of a new Alabama congressional map with greater representation for black voters to proceed. The new districts also could help Democrats trying to flip control of the House of Representatives. The justices, without noted dissent, rejected the state's plea to retain Republican-drawn lines that were turned down by a lower court. And a judge ruled Tuesday that Donald Trump committed fraud for years while building his real estate empire that catapulted him to fame and the White House. Judge Arthur Engoron, ruling in a civil lawsuit brought by New York's Attorney General, found that the former president and his company deceived banks, insurers, and others by massively overvaluing his assets and exaggerating his net worth on paperwork used in making deals and securing financing. The judge ordered that some of Donald Trump's business licenses be rescinded as punishment. And this from the New York Times: a stampede of Senate Democrats, led by some of the party's most endangered incumbents, rushed forward on Tuesday calling for Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey to resign, a day after he defiantly vowed to fight federal corruption charges and predicted he would be exonerated. The most notable call for Mr. Menendez to go came from Senator Cory Booker, the junior senator from New Jersey, who has long been a close friend and fierce defender of Mr. Menendez. And C-SPAN counts at least 18 Senate Democrats calling for Democratic Senator Bob Menendez to resign. A Democratic freshman U.S. House member, Jeff Jackson of North Carolina, posted this video.
A member of my party in the Senate was just indicted for taking bribes. He should resign. When I say bribes, I mean things like hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, which they found at his house, gold bars, which they also found at his house, and a Mercedes for his wife. This senator was chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, so he had a lot of power over whether other countries got money or weapons from us. Egypt wanted money and weapons, and the allegation is that they used a businessman to make that happen by bribing the senator. The day after the senator took a trip to Egypt, he Googled, "How much is a kilo of gold worth?" The indictment focuses a lot on the timing of the payments that the senator received, coming immediately before or after he did something that would help the Egyptian government. There are also allegations that he took bribes to interfere with a couple of criminal prosecutions, and one of those is allegedly where the Mercedes for his wife came from. She's indicted as well as the go-between for a lot of these transactions. There are a bunch of text messages between her and him and the others that are very incriminating. Some of the cash was stuffed in an envelope that had the DNA of the guy who was allegedly bribing him still on the envelope. And senators are required to disclose all of the income they receive, and at no point during this period did the senator disclose the cash or the gold. The senator responded to his indictment by saying that he is totally innocent. He says the prosecutors have misrepresented the normal work of a congressional office. Well, bull. I'm a member of Congress, and I assure you, taking gold bars from someone trying to avoid prosecution is not part of my normal work. I'm also a former prosecutor, and the idea that a senator would try and intervene in an ongoing prosecution, that ain't normal either. Now look, prosecutors can make mistakes. That's why we all have a presumption of innocence in a criminal court. But we also all have the right to ask people in elected office to step down if we see clear evidence of ethical failure. That's why I called on George Santos to resign. I read his indictment, and I thought there was strong evidence that he behaved in an indefensible way. Now it's a member of my party. And frankly, the allegations are much more serious than the ones against Santos. I don't know what a jury's going to do, but I know what I'm going to do looking at this evidence. I'm going to ask him to step down. For something like this, party doesn't matter. We all deserve better treatment than this as citizens, and we should insist on it. I'll keep you posted.
Congressman Jeff Jackson, Democrat from North Carolina, in a video on X, formerly Twitter, and that one profanity was removed. While nearly half of the Senate Democrats have now called on Senator Menendez to resign, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has not. He put out a statement on Friday that read, Bob Menendez has been a dedicated public servant and is always fighting hard for the people of New Jersey. He has a right to due process and a fair trial. Senator Menendez has rightly decided to step down temporarily from his position as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee until the matter has been resolved. Senator Debbie Stabenow, Democrat from Michigan, taking a similar position. She was interviewed this morning on MSNBC.
Well, first of all, these are very serious charges, no question about it. And I believe that Senator Menendez, that the people in New Jersey will have the ultimate decision on this. But let me also say, Willie, that we're not attacking the FBI. We're not attacking the Justice Department. We take this very, very seriously, counter to what is happening with Republicans in terms of protecting Donald Trump and going after our justice system. So we need to be focusing on making sure the system works.
Your former colleague, Claire McCaskill, was here saying, look, as a United States Senator, you can't have somebody pay for your lunch, let alone the things that Senator Menendez is accused of here. So, yes, he'll have his day in court, but the point that Senator Baldwin made a few minutes ago is just the lapse in judgment, and the ethics piece of it means he should step down. Do you agree?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we will let this move forward this week, and we'll see what happens.
So not yet for you?
Not yet.
Senator Debbie Stabenow on MSNBC. And for the White House position about Senator Menendez, questions to the Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre as she met with reporters on Air Force One.
Does the president think that Senator Menendez should resign? So I was asked this question yesterday. Look, this is a serious matter. We take this very seriously, as I said yesterday. We think the senator did the right thing by stepping down from his chairmanship. As it relates to resigning, that is something that's up to him and the leadership in the Senate. But look, we take this very seriously.
It's just that there's more than there's a handful of senators who are now calling for him to resign. So does the president think that he can still be a good public servant in the face of these allegations?
That is up to the Senate body, that is up to the Senate leadership, and that is up to Senator Menendez. But again, we see this indeed as a serious matter.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre with reporters on Air Force One as they all flew with the president from Washington, D.C. to Michigan today. Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, says that Senator Menendez should not resign. He posted on X, the charges against Senator Menendez are serious and troubling. At the same time, the Department of Justice has a troubling record of failure and corruption in cases against public figures, from Ted Stevens to Bob McDonnell to Donald Trump to Bob Menendez the last time around. Senator Menendez has a right to test the government's evidence in court, just like any other citizen. He should be judged by jurors and New Jersey's voters, not by Democratic politicians who now view him as inconvenient to their hold on power. That post from Republican Senator Tom Cotton. This is Washington Today. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, spoke today about abortion legislation he would like to see enacted in Virginia if Republicans win control of the state Senate and keep control of the state Assembly after the elections in November. He was interviewed by David Rubenstein, the president of the Economic Club of Washington.
One of the issues that some people say you would like to use a Republican Senate for is to have an abortion ban or a limit. I think Virginia is the only southern state that does not have a legislation that restricts abortion. So your position on abortion is it 15 months or 15 weeks? I'm sorry, 15 weeks. Yeah. All right. How do you come to 15 weeks versus 19 or 12 and do you think you can pass that? And do you think the people in Virginia really want that ban?
Well, let me just back up for a moment. I was in a conference room in D.C. the last summer before last, with the Washington Post editorial board. We were having a fun conversation. It was 14 on 1, but we were having a great exchange of views when the Supreme Court ruling came down. And I immediately went back to Virginia, and we put a press release out. And the press release was really clear, which is I would like for Virginians to come together around a bill to protect life when a baby can feel pain at 15 weeks. And this is what I've asked our legislators to work on. We didn't get it done in the last legislative session. I think we can get it done. I think this is a place where Virginians can come together. See, what the progressive left has been doing in our Senate and across our legislature is trying to make abortion available all the way up through and including birth. And, this is a tough topic for folks, but, just 3 years ago, the former governor came out and said that you would keep a child comfortable while you decided whether that child lived or died. That is an extreme position, and it just didn't set well with Virginians. And so I have felt that we can come together around this moment to protect life at 15 weeks when a baby can feel pain, and that's when scientifically it shows that children can feel pain. Viability is somewhere between 15 and 22 weeks. And I think this is a place we can come together. And this is why I'm really advocating with all of our candidates to support this position. They have all said yes, they do. And I'm hoping that Virginia can lead again here. Virginia can show that in one of the toughest issues in America, that we can find a place to come together and maybe demonstrate a path forward here.
So in Florida, I think the governor supported and the legislature agreed to a 6-week ban after 6 weeks, or up to 6 weeks. You don't support that. Your 15 is your number.
Yeah, I've been very clear. I support a 15-week bill, and this is what I'm hoping to get passed in our legislature when we hold our House and flip our Senate.
Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, Republican, interviewed by David Rubenstein, president of the Economic Club of Washington, in Washington, D.C. today. Hillary Clinton returned to the State Department today for the unveiling of her official portrait as the nation's 67th Secretary of State. She was in that position during President Obama's first term, 2009 through 13. Current Secretary of State Antony Blinken praised Hillary Clinton for, among other things, calling out Russian President Vladimir Putin for who he really is from the start. And when Hillary Clinton spoke, she too mentioned President Putin.
So we built global coalitions to curb nuclear proliferation, to tackle climate change, to promote democracy. We continued to build on our human rights commitments, women's rights, gay rights, the rights of all people to have a chance to live up to their own God-given potential. And we have seen the continuation of a lot of the values and priorities that we worked on into the Biden administration. And in looking across the globe, defending democracy in Ukraine, expanding NATO, just as an aside, too bad, Vladimir. You brought it on yourself, and that was such a point of contention. And we always said, people are not forced to join NATO. People choose and want to join NATO, and so indeed, expanding NATO.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton today at the State Department, the unveiling of her official portrait as the 67th Secretary of State. She also joked that it had been a while since she saw that portrait because she said it was between COVID and between not wanting to finish it during the prior administration, a reference to former President Trump, who beat her in the 2016 presidential election. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word. It's free, and get the stories making headlines emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.